Thank you, sir. Good morning. My name is Pierre. As I was said, I'm a director of Social Platform, which is the largest European network of social NGOs in Brussels. And for the last 4 years, we have been fighting for the adoption of this directive, which is blocked. What I would like to say today is that there is emergency. It's not a file like any other files. People are waiting for their rights to be implemented. And we would like to understand what's going on in the Council. And I would repeat the same word during all my presentation, is coherence. First of all, we need coherence with the reality on the ground. People are suffering from discrimination every day. And I would like to make it personal today. In a sense, like 1 European in 6 is suffering from discrimination. There are about 200 people in this room today. So I'm going to take 1 out of 6 in this room, and I would take this share of the room, where mostly representatives from member states are seated. And I'm going to tell you why you should not be in this room today with us. The first reason is that I'm sure that if you had suffered from discrimination in the past, you wouldn't have gone to the nice university or good university you went to in order to get the job that you have today. Second, you might be running out of this room in order to get a rent or a loan from the bank, because all the bank refuse your loan to get a house in Brussels or outside Brussels, and you will say, I'm sorry, I cannot attend the hearing today because I need that loan, that's the priority. Third reason, your iPhone, BlackBerry might be ringing because the director of the schools of your kids is calling you because your daughter, who's 16, is suffering from bullying because she discovered her sexual orientation and she prefers girls than men. That's the things. And the fourth reason, you might be fed up living in the apartment of your friends because every time you go for renting an apartment, people are saying, I'm sorry, the apartment is already rented. So today, you will not be with us because of all this reason that everybody is suffering in Europe. First reason, and I think we are tired of waiting for the last 4 years for this document to be adopted. People need instruments to redress. When the purpose of legislation is not to solve the situation, equality will not be changed overnight. But people need some legal framework so that they can say this is not acceptable. That's the whole purpose of legislation, is to say you've been discriminating me and I want redress. We all know for what social NGOs stand for. We have our values. We believe in equality. We believe that anyone who is different has the same rights as us. So this is what we stand for.
For instance, already in the 1980s and 1990s, the calculations were made about deinstitutionalization of people with mental disabilities or with mental problems or intellectual disabilities. And it was quite clear that the cost of having large-scale institutions was very, very significant. So there is quite a bit of evidence on the quantifiable, I would say, cost of anti-discrimination, non-anti-discrimination provisions. On the other hand, there are also issues which are wider and which were raised by you, and they're not so much to be collected in the form of data, but rather to be argued in a body such as a parliament about what we lose when people with different abilities or when people with a different sexual orientation, because they suffer discrimination directly or indirectly, do not make it to a certain position. So Stephen Hawkins, for instance, could not have been with us. What would society lose by not having scientists who may have a different ability, a disability, or a different sexual orientation? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to ask Mr. Dimitrakopoulos about a figure that he mentioned, actually, that leads us to the question of methodology. You say that the most common discrimination is age discrimination. I believe it is so, but I just wonder if this is not a bit misleading, because simply everyone gets old. Old people are more than any other group that can be discriminated by definition. And that can be quite misleading because, for example, in my country, I think that the worst thing is, the worst discrimination is somewhere else, not about old people, but I'm sure that if you make a kind of a opinion poll, maybe the figures will always show age discrimination. And I just believe that this is a little bit my conviction, and also I have some other arguments than conviction, is that this is quite misleading to put it on top of the agenda. And the other thing is that in your studies, do you have some patterns emerging about, like, for example, the most common discrimination in Eastern Europe or ex-communist Europe is one thing, then in other countries is different, or South-North division? Do you have something like this? Because that would be very, very interesting for countries that doesn't have a long tradition in establishing that kind of legislation. And the other thing is just a guess, but when you look at directives of such a scope, there are countries that have to lower actually their norms. If there are, then this is another reason for a country to be against that directive. Is there such a case? Because there were questions, I mean, who is against that? But I would ask a more positive question. Whose country's legislation is beyond the demands of what we're talking about? It's in a much better condition, I mean.
Okay, any further comment from our panelists to the point that has been made by Mr. Malinov? Madame Chopin?
Yes, just one. I don't think countries never have to lower the level of protection, and it was mentioned in the Racial Equality Directive. I mean, countries that have a superior level of protection, they might keep it. So I would say that it's really a bad argument from the countries that are opposing the adoption of the horizontal directive, saying, well, we have such a good level of protection that if we would sign up for the directive, we would have to go so much more down. That's not the case.